Hello, everybody. This is Hyperborean Radio. This is the Lore Keeper speaking, and with me, as always, is Celtic God. Say
Hello.
hi to the fine people, everybody.
Hello, fine people.
All right, today we're actually going to talk about God of War, and it's a bit of an odd topic. I'm actually surprised that we actually ended up liking it, because really we were expecting the absolute worst from it.
Right. Specifically the newest one.
Yes.
Number 5 that just came out.
Oh, yes, with a little bit of 4, but what actually prompted this was one of our patrons actually asked us about video games, and we started talking about God of War, and we ended up watching the video game, and...
Which, by the way, I didn't want to watch.
No.
I had zero hopes, zero
interest, and they still get plenty wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Tyr as a pacifist with, like, some new age
Well, before
guru
we get
stuff.
into that, let's stop right here, back up just a little bit,
All right.
and let's do the thank yous.
Oh, yes. Thank you to our friend William, who does our thumb plates for us, because we don't do them. We're kind of Photoshop illiterate. We're not very
Well, that
good
and he just does a good job. And
Oh,
he
yeah,
gives
he's-
us extra options that we don't even necessarily think about.
Oh, yeah. Like, occasionally we'll actually end up using one that he came up with completely. Like, we didn't even find the picture. We didn't even find the idea, and he just nails it.
Which we share to our Patreon. So if you're curious about that, I think the $5 one will get you the...
Oh, yeah.
Reviews on
$5
that.
and up will get you access to the different thumb plates. And thank you to the patrons.
Yes.
For backing us directly, as well as to the people that share us around.
Right, because we're growing.
We are growing, and we are aware we're a niche within a niche within a niche within a niche. So thank you to everybody that listens and shares us around. We really do appreciate it. And especially thank you to those people who are getting our products and backing us in other ways as well.
It's allowing us slowly to get to the point where we're going to be doing some new and interesting things, including, even though it's pretty much the same format, things like today with the God of War 5 review thing. That's not really a review, but it's a review, so hold on to your panties.
Well, and it's not a game review because we didn't play the game.
Right, yeah. We don't care about the gameplay.
No, but
Good.
we've talked about this before. Media, whatever form it comes in, when it features stuff from our lore, there's an opportunity there. If you understand our lore enough, you can start parsing it out. And I was pleasantly surprised that there was freaking gold in this game.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, I had absolutely no interest in watching the video. Like, you first started watching it, I'm like, yeah, have fun with that.
Well, and I wasn't originally going to watch it. I was avoiding it like the plague. And then our friend Neil was like, oh, there's some good bits in it. And it's kind of funny because by the end, Neil hated it because it was personally kind of...
Because of some of the things that they got wrong. Because there are some elephants in the room.
Oh, yes.
There are some definite elephants in the room, and we're going to basically only spend a couple minutes focused on that, because otherwise it'll turn into an hour and a half long bitch fest, which is not the point. Everybody knows Angry Booty is wrong.
Yes.
Grinda is wrong.
Durban is wrong.
Yes.
They race bend characters like Angerboda, Gryla, Hildisvini, Durlin. They make Tyr this pacifist new age guru. There's some Abrahamic bits here and there. Thor is mostly done fairly well, but they kind of emphasize he's kind of depressed and a drunk.
Which makes sense, I guess, for the story that they're telling, because it's not... Okay, the character is accurate, but the character is in a new story. That's the other thing a lot of people that you're going to have to take into account. It's a new story. This is not... You're not playing the Eddas. You're not playing the sagas. You are playing God of War. It is a new story.
God of War 5 specifically. So you got 4 other movies / games, because they're not movies. They're games.
Well, let's be honest. They're playable movies.
Yes, which actually makes them superior to movies.
Yes.
Because you actually have to work for those cutscenes. You have to work for the story. And then you can insert all these little things that we've started to notice.
Well, and like one of our friends, during one of the scenes that we was showing, and then he's like, but I really hate, I think it was Heimdall.
Oh, yeah, how Heimdall was depicted as a youth.
Right.
And whiny.
And I'm like, but that's the point of him doing that, is that you don't notice all these other good bits. It's like the thing that you said with it's like the mouse and the electric cheese.
Yes, it's like electrified cheese. The cheese is good for you, but it's electrified, so you end up disliking the cheese. That's what they do.
And then the other side of it, as you pointed out, rightfully so, is if you then don't mind the
electric shocks, you end up enjoying electric shocks with your cheese.
Right.
Which is kind of what they do when they depict the lore typically. They'll have something good right next to something bad, and one of two things happens. You end up disliking or over-focusing. You either over-focus on the negative.
And therefore hate the good thing.
Hate the good thing or ignore the good thing. Or you focus on the good.
And therefore accept the shitty thing.
Whereas if you understand the good and appreciate the good, but also separate out the inaccuracies, the problems, then you can get something out of it.
Right,
then
which is what we're doing.
Yes.
We know some of these choices was made on purpose just to make people either accept that or absolutely hate the other. We understand this choice is made, so we separate these things out so that we can focus on what they got right while ignoring the big elephant turd that's in the room with us.
Well, and how I would describe it is most forms of media that talk about paganism range from like 0% right to like 10. Mm-hmm. So you're working with a really low percentage there. But then you have things like this latest game. And yeah, it's inaccurate as frick in some parts, but there are certain things where they hit like the 60-70%. So they take it from a very hard F to like a D or a C. It's a passing grade, which is more than we're used to.
Right. And again, you're not playing the Eddas. You're not playing the sagas. You're not playing the epics. What you're doing is playing a whole new game. So they got the who of a lot of these really, really good, right on point. And they did a remarkable job, including, which we're not at the point currently where we can show the video that'd be a completely different format thing. But they, right down to the body language in some of the cases. It's epically beautiful. I think the one scene that I just showed you is from 4, where Mimir's talking about Ymir dying, and then little things like Loki reaching over and touching the water because it's the blood of the giant. And then at the end, he's wiping that tear away from his eye. Just the little things. Things like in 5, which is the one that we're actually reviewing, Thor's facial expressions, Odin's body movement during some of the scenes, which we'll end up getting to. But, yeah, it's the little things that pulls it all together.
Well, and the game's not been out long enough for most people to play it, but just the promotional images. Like, even if the rest of the game had been trash, just the Thor design they handed us, just that is useful because I've used it to show people this is the most accurate depiction of Thor to the lore I've ever seen physically, and actually explain and describe him and have watch them
regular
start
people are
grinning.
More drawn to that image than they are of, is it Chris Hemsworth?
Christopher Hemsworth, the pretty boy, like Balder Thor.
Yeah. Well, and then explain like the Thor from God of War 5. That is a more accurate physical representation of Thor. And then Marvel's Thor is Balder borrowing Thor's equipment and pretending to be Thor. And then they're like, yeah, I can see that. That makes sense.
Well, it's the trick here with most of this pagan media is not to hate on it. Because, there are things in almost everything they make that is enough to boil your blood. Mm-hmm. But by not focusing on that, by not allowing it to make you bitter, by focusing on the positives, you can take these things and show people. Because part of the disadvantage paganism has right now is most people aren't brought up with it. They're not brought up with the lore. They're not brought up with the gods or the spirits.
Well, and quite frequently, they just simply overthink it.
Overthink it or actually vilify it. Mm-hmm. Like you say paganism, they think, goat blood rituals, pet cemetery, sacrifice people in the Wicker Man to the
or
corn god.
even like one of our friends, he trying to make sense of certain things, and he's like, but maybe I'm overthinking it. And then really quickly he realizes he's overthinking it.
I'll give you the advice of my ancestors. You're overthinking it, egghead.
Yes. Yeah, anyways, to get back to the thing, let's start with Kratos. Who is Kratos? Kratos is completely made up, completely fictional, but
he's touched something.
Right.
He's touched a heartstring. People value him.
Well, and really, the player is Kratos. Kratos is the stand-in for the player, who is, in this case, a god. Now, is he a god of war? Well, not really. And the Kratos character even knows he's not a god of war. He is a god of vengeance and wrath.
Yes. Well, I mean, he actually has this one scene that's really good, where he talks about how I may be a god of war in form, but it is not my nature.
Well, and there's a nice quote that I looked up and then we wrote down.
Something along the lines of, let's see,
at least I thought that we were.
It is the nature of a thing that matters, not its form.
Yes.
That is actually very, very true, and it's something we've brought up over and over again. Like Easter eggs. I always go to Easter eggs because it's usually the most obvious. Painting the Easter egg just because you like it versus painting it as some kind of bribe for Easter, the goddess.
Mm-hmm.
Two very different things. They're both the same form. You're making an Easter egg, but it's the nature of the thing that matters.
Right.
And that is so incredibly true, and it actually sums up a lot of elements of paganism, of ethnic faith.
Well, let's use Thor as an example. A lot of people say he is the god of strength. Well, no, that is his form. How's the wording?
Nature.
The nature of it is he is the god of the strong,
and embodies that. He is the god of the strong, and he himself is strong.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of his nature. He is a strong individual, and they do that in the game. Like, it's not just the fact that he has a strongman build. It's not just the fact that he is large, like bigger than the average person by far. It's not just that he has the red hair and beard.
Oh, he is solid.
Yes, he is solid. He is strong. He's also a family man.
Yeah.
Which is something that's almost always left out of any depiction of Thor.
Mm-hmm.
He's a family man.
Well, and really, I think that they ended up getting so much right simply because they wanted to get it right, but they weren't actually trying. They didn't care about, well, how are people going to perceive this? And, well, he is the god of the strong, and therefore he must be blah, blah, blah. They didn't get all esoteric with it. They just took the stories, made them make sense, and then jammed them together. Well, as best they could. One of my personal gripes, it's not an elephant, but it's a donkey in the room. It's an ass in the room. Is that they mixed up the Celtic and the Scandinavian.
Consistently.
Like
the whole
the entirety
game
of
is
it.
a blend of both. From the set design, the architecture, even the creatures. Like, they don't go into the creatures too much in the cutscenes.
It'd be fine if they had explained that the Celts and the Scandinavians have a lot of overlap somehow, because they could have done that. And therefore, that's why these things are here too.
Well, that's actually, Mimir is implied to be a Celtic god. They even call him Puck at one point. So there's like we said, there's plenty they got wrong, but that's not what we're going to focus on.
Correct. We're focusing on what they got right. In particular, they got Thor, and I'm going to call him Othin because they didn't do the AFA Odin.
No,
except until the very freaking end,
where they made him Mega Gandalf.
Right. But right up until that very end, he was Othin. He was not Odin.
Oh yeah,
and when we say Odin, we mean as the AFA or what's the European one called?
True Assembly or something like that. Yeah. But the Eddic Odin, just like there's Olympian Zeus and there's actual Zeus, there's Eddic Odin and actual Othin.
Right. The only part of Eddic Odin that's in there is the All-Father, the father of all the gods, and therefore they all grovel at his feet, except for, some of them don't grovel at his feet.
Yep.
So, yeah. So we'll take that part and shove that over with the ass that's in the room.
Well, and actually, there's one scene that really, both Thor and Odin, where they get it so right, and it's really early in the game. It's the scene where Thor evokes the rules of hospitality.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of people, there's so many little things that are so right, and most people won't notice it. They'll know that it's right, but not why. So when Thor first shows up in the game, and there's the crack of thunder and all this good stuff, yeah, he evokes the rule of hospitality. And why? It's because it forces a lack of direct head-to-head conflict.
Well, and he also reveals that he is armed.
Yes.
Which is actually part of the rule of hospitality, is if you're armed, you must declare it.
Yeah.
And then, on top of that, he says, I brought mead.
Yes, because you're supposed to, if you're going to intentionally evoke the rule of hospitality, especially during tensions, the custom is you bring a gift for the host. And then he waits until he's actually invited inside. He doesn't just walk on in. And then, during the scene, it's beautiful. He takes a portion first, other than he's made another oath.
That he's not supposed to drink.
Right, he's not supposed to drink. But to show that it is what he is proclaiming it to be, when he opens it up, he takes his portion first, which is a smell. And then part of it that you loved is when he pours it out, there's two cups. He pours out the first cup looking at Kratos. And then he turns his gaze and he looks at Loki. And as he's pouring out the second cup. And then I think he took another sniff of the
oh yeah, he took another sniff. And right before he put the meat out, he also put his weapon on there.
Yeah, he put his weapon on the table because Kratos was still holding his. But Kratos is Greek.
So he's got a different rule of hospitality than the Northern Europeans do.
Right. So then, before the meat even comes out, the weapons are declared and set on the table so that if they're grabbed, it's obvious. There is no sneaking about it. So murder becomes really difficult.
Well, and just Thor's even fairly honest about why he's there. He's literally just being polite.
Yes. He comes right out and says it. He is perfectly honest through the entirety of it. And then he even points out how Kratos is rude. Because after he pours it out, he goes to hand out the cups, as is the custom, because he's the one that brought the gifts. So he hands out the gifts. He offers the cup to Loki. Kratos, no. And then he goes to grab for the other one, and Kratos says again, no. And Thor's like, well, you could have told me before I poured it out.
Yes, because now it's got to be drunk.
Yeah, now it has to be drank.
Which brings us to the scene with Odin coming in. And Odin actually starts the whole thing out by breaking the rule of hospitality.
Yes.
Like, Odin knocks on the door, and then Thor doesn't open the door. It's not his house.
He doesn't even stir.
No, it's Atreus' Kratos' job to open the door. So Atreus goes and does it. Then Odin, he does the whole absorbing the ravens into his arm. It's a stylistic choice. But then he walks in. Whole time, power move. And this is the first glance you get.
From beginning to end.
And the design of Odin is so good.
Let's call him Othin.
Oh, yeah, because that's what he is. This isn't Odin.
He is the beggar king.
Yes. Walks right in. I mean, just the design. I just want to focus on the design because it's so good, just like Thor. If any complaint I had, I would like the beard to be a bit longer, but fuck it. Close enough.
Right. Well, and I argue that the beard is just fine because he's trying to appear like the aristocracy, but he is not aristocracy. So everything about his design, it's nearly perfect because it is one step off from being aristocratic. Like, he knows what these things look like, but he can't quite pull it off. Kind
of like Bill the Butcher, who is another fictional character I often compare to Othin. He wants to appear educated, and he is. He's been educated in the school of hard knocks for millennia. Mm-hmm. So he's smarter than someone who's been educated.
He's been educated at the gambling tables. He's been educated in the back alleys. He's been educated at the front end of a fist.
Well, and every single thing he does is a power move. And his design, it's also the coat he's wearing. He's wearing it like a cape, and it makes him look bigger than he is because he's not a very big individual.
It's about 3 sizes too big, maybe more.
It looks like it would almost fit like if Thor was skinny instead of built like a strong man.
Yeah.
But it's much too big for him. Like, he got mismatched clothes. And then the eye patch. Not only is the eye patch there, which actually there's a later scene where he explains how he lost his eye. He lost it in the pursuit of knowledge, which is accurate. It's not the Mimir's Well thing.
Right, because there's actually several stories about how Othin lost his eye.
Yes, it's not just the one with the well. That's just the one everyone knows because it's in the Eddas.
It's always about the pursuit of knowledge, though, which was brilliant on the game designer's part. It shows that they did some research, and they're like, oh, there is more stories than just the Eddic one. There are several stories about how he lost his eye, but every one of them concerns the pursuit of knowledge.
So long as that's consistent, you can have him lose his eye anyway. So long as that's consistent. That's the thing about the folklore, is even if there's multiple versions of the same myth, the through line is the important bit.
Right.
It's like there's
like we was saying before with fantasy, you have to get the who. The what is less consequential.
Yes, it is the nature of a thing that matters, not its form.
Right.
That it sums up a lot. It's such a good quote. But then Odin comes in. He starts talking.
Well, and notice that all of his clothes are just a little bit mismatched.
Oh yeah, Othin is and one of the things I liked is the detail of his eye patch.
Mm-hmm.
Is there's armor right there, and you even showed me why it's there.
The small armor piece behind his ear.
Yes,
it's because he's mouthy. People get angry with him.
It's guards a weak spot.
Yeah, it guards a weak spot in his head. In everybody's head. Everybody has it. It's behind your ear.
Yeah, it's much like Thor. If they actually got the design fairly well, because Thor's belt that he's wearing with his basically it's a stylized kilt basically. Mm-hmm. But they should have brought that up a bit more.
Well, they should have had him wearing a war belt.
Yes,
because he's wearing a belt, but it's again not going to focus on what's wrong. But it should have just been a war belt,
well,
a war
because
girdle.
Basically, part of what the war belt's supposed to guard is your off button.
Yeah, your belly button.
Yes, because you punch that or stab that, you are taking someone out.
Yeah.
But Odin comes in this scene, and he takes control of the situation immediately. He gets his own seat, sits down
at the head of the table.
Marking himself as the figure of authority.
Places his weapons on the table, which is his hands.
Yes.
Because he's effectively unarmed. And the way that he does it commands presence without commanding presence.
Well, and then the way he talks, he makes it very clear.
Which, by the way, at first, I was like, I hate his voice. Oh, wait, never mind.
Oh, yeah.
They picked a good voice actor.
Well, the actor that plays him does both dramatic roles and comedic roles. That's partly why he's able to pull it off.
Mm-hmm. There's other issues with the actor himself, but we're going to
ignore that. But the thing with how Odin behaves is actually it's genius the way he does it, because he actually disarms them each one by one with his words. Because when he's talking, he's like, I think there were some misunderstandings before winter set in, but I think we both understand each other a bit more. Now, what you did to his boys, and you can see Thor's like focusing in because he wants validation. Validation. He wants to know his sons died to a worthy opponent, which is why he fights Kratos shortly after this scene. That's actually the one problem with this scene is Thor breaks the rule of hospitality. Thor wouldn't have done that.
But anyways, back to
the good stuff. Odin, basically, he's like, now what you did to his boys, self-defense. And then Thor looks away.
Oh, you can see Thor. Kudos to the animators. You can see Thor grow disappointed and angry and sorrowful all at the same time, the expression on his face.
Well, and what that did was it not only made Kratos kind of surprised because they're not there for revenge, but now he's disarmed Thor. Thor has lost authority, which that authority then shifts to Odin.
Right. Well, and in his let's call it disappointment, Thor then turns his head away from Odin, refusing to look at him.
Using his hair to hide it, which is another element of his design that's really good. Thor is not a warrior. He is a champion. He's very strong, very dangerous, but it's a different look.
Right, and he has the long hair, but it's not what most people will think of as long hair. He doesn't have the, what the hell is that one stupid commercial we mock? L'Oreal.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the L'Oreal hair.
Yeah, he doesn't have L'Oreal because you're worth it.
Right. But he has what are people actually considered long hair at the time for men.
Yes. And then he uses that actually to kind of hide his face because he's disappointed. And then he goes on and he starts talking about, well, Balder died, so now we have to talk about that because that I'm not as willing to forgive. But I want you to do this thing. And he talks about how Atreus / Loki has to stop his search for Tyr, which Kratos didn't know about, which disarms Kratos and takes his authority away.
Mm-hmm.
And Loki, because now those two have an issue. Odin has completely taken control of the situation. The only person left in the room that is not currently basically lower in Odin's status in the room is Mimir, even though he's literally ahead. So the first thing he does after he goes through these basic things.
Well, hold on, you forgot another power move. While he's initially talking to them, he reaches over and grabs the cup in front of Thor, takes a drink, basically slams the cup back down on the table.
And then does the same with Kratos.
And looking Thor in the eye when he's drinking out of Thor's cup, because it's now Thor's cup whether he wants it or not. And then he does the same thing to Kratos. So he took their things.
He established himself as the dominant force in the room. And then as it continues, he then reveals, because earlier in the scene they'd hidden Mimir because they didn't want him to know that they had Mimir's head. He then says, I'll even sweeten the deal. I'll let you keep the prisoner that I know you took. Yes, I know you're here, you silver-tongued little shit. And then Mimir starts talking. Mimir revealed himself.
Yeah.
That puts him at a lower...
Othin didn't know that he was in there. He was guessing that he was in there.
Yes. And worst that happens is he's wrong. But what is he wrong about? Who the frick cares? It's a win-win scenario for him. But now, every single other individual in that room is at a lower station than Othin. He has set himself up as the head honcho of that entire room. That entire house.
Well, and even had he been wrong, had Mimir not been there, he could have still played it off as a power move. Well, that's of no consequence that he's not actually here. The point is you have him, and I know it. It wouldn't have disarmed him even if he had been wrong, because he has cunning.
Yes. Well, that's the thing with Othin. Othin is not dangerous because he's a physical combatant, which is part of the thing they get wrong later in the boss battle.
It's part of my issue with it.
But Othin is extremely dangerous in other ways, which is what he established in that scene.
Well, it's an entire psychological battle.
Well, and then he offers Loki Atreus answers and to come talk to him. And then he even, after Kratos and Thor start fighting, which that fight scene, while it shouldn't have happened, because at least the way it did, Thor is literally just fighting Kratos to make sure his sons died against an actual worthy opponent.
Right.
And then he actually takes a freaking axe strike to the gut and walks it off.
Yeah.
So they're not dismissing Thor as a weak combatant. Keep in mind that Kratos...
Well, and such a powerful axe strike that it gets stuck in his abdomen for a second.
And he walks away from it. He gets this twice in the same scene. And then they bother to animate it the rest of the game.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Now, it's for Othin, he didn't break... Well, he broke the rule of hospitality when he first came in. But he also didn't evoke it. So he didn't technically break it. But after his negotiations and Kratos turns him down, he then, as he's walking out, make it quick.
Oh, don't take all day.
Oh, don't take all day. So he then gives his champion permission to fight, and then Thor broke the rule of hospitality. But Othin didn't. Now, to keep Thor's honor completely intact, had I been involved, Thor would have got up, went outside, and called Kratos outside.
Well, and part of the reason that Othin had him do that was because he wanted a moment alone with Atreus to invite him to Asgard, and then he left money to pay for the roof that was broken.
Yeah.
And he came prepared to pay for the roof.
So Weirguild straight away.
Yes. Unlike Kratos, who Othin is implying broke blood payments, as they call them in the game.
Right.
He hasn't, but it's another power move by Othin.
Well, and then implying there's certain implications, but they're political implications. Like, you murdered this person, you murdered that person. No, he didn't. There's a difference between killing somebody and murdering them. Kratos didn't murder anybody.
Well,
but they call it murder because that's a political thing, which does show up in later writings.
Well, and Othin is a god of, I don't want to say politics, but the political machinations.
Yeah.
But it even shows how Othin views people, because he even calls Thor's sons kind of useless.
Mm-hmm.
But Baldur was his best tracker. He was useful.
Yeah.
He's not happy when he loses someone useful. He doesn't even care about his own
Everybody
grandsons.
is tools.
Yes. That's how he treats everyone in the game, and it's accurate.
And the thing is does it make him a bad guy? No. Does it make him a dick? Yeah.
Well, the way they have Othin set up is really accurate. Nobody trusts him. Plenty of people listen to him, and he's charismatic enough that you never know what he's doing.
Right.
Is he telling you the truth? Is he lying? Like, what is it? And then I could get something either way.
And he's manipulative. Is he asking you to do this thing because he wants you to do it, and therefore the way to mess him up is to deny it? Or is he asking you to do the thing because he doesn't want you to do it, and he knows that you'll deny him, so then the way that you mess him up is by doing it? In reality, it doesn't matter which one you do.
No. Well, and then there's another scene way later in the game that it's about the midway point. The first scene we talked about is the beginning, but at the midway point, you have that other scene we like, which is when Loki gets to Asgard, climbs up the wall, meets Heimdall, and Heimdall, the way I would describe him is, yes, there's plenty of issues with him. For one, he's too young.
Massive character design flaws.
Yes, they got certain things right, like he's got really good senses, and I hate it, but it is lore accurate, which is golden teeth. That always sounded so silly to me. But, like, he's not, and he is protected.
Well, it sounds silly until you realize some of the Scandinavian, I believe it's specifically Scandinavian archaeological finds that they found where they found people with actual golden teeth where or not actual golden teeth, but where they had dental work done and there was gold used in their teeth. So, yeah,
maybe.
Sure. Maybe he got punched in the mouth really hard one time and they had to fix his teeth.
Maybe. But he's very protective, which makes sense. There are a couple problems. One, he's too young. He's depicted like 17 years old. He would be a full-grown
let's
man.
Just cover that with character design is massively flawed, but at least I'm pretty sure.
It's an improvement over Idris Elba from the MCU by far. And then he's protective of the Aesir, but he's also protective of people. That's lore accurate. So he's a protector on both ends. But Heimdall, improvement. I will take that as a win. The very fact that this will help with the whole Heimdall isn't black thing that never should have been a thing in the first place, but we have had to argue with people about that before. But the scene, before it actually gets to the scene we actually want to talk about, there's this one scene where Heimdall and Loki are riding up to the Great Hall, which is like Odin's hall, basically. And Loki's basically asking, I thought he'd have a palace. And Heimdall is basically, the line is, real power, you see, does not need to flaunt. Basically pointing out, why would a god need to puff himself up like a mortal?
Right.
He doesn't need a palace. Why would he want a palace?
A humble hall should be more than enough.
And it's still the Great Hall. But then you have this whole fight scene with Heimdall and Loki, and then Thor shows up and just physically dominates the whole situation. And there's all these little details.
Right, and Thor doesn't throw a single punch. He dominates it with his sheer presence and personality. Physical,
emotional, everything about Thor just dominates. And it's actually a testament to how well they did Othin, because Othin actually is one of the few gods that can kind of override Thor's presence there.
Yeah.
Because Thor's presence any other time dominates wherever he is. around.
He's larger than life.
But Othin is able to overcome that despite being like 1/8 his size.
Before we get to that part, I want to bring up it's beautiful because of Heimdall's power set in this game. It's not lore accurate. But screw it, it's a video game. It doesn't matter. They could have done it better, yes, but fuck it. They did just fine, I guess. But Heimdall's really hard to hit. That's his power set in the video game. He can basically see what's coming before it comes and therefore dodge, and he's hard to hit. And then he looks at he looks at Thor and he's like, "How do you plan on stopping me?" And Thor says, "Look in my eyes."
What do you think?
Yeah, what do you think? And then Heimdall just cowers because he realizes Thor can stop him. It doesn't matter. Thor can stop him and crush him to paste. So that was kind of that was something impressive. And Thor didn't have to actually do anything. He did it all with his eyes.
Yes, and he even got Heimdall to just throw his weapon down and basically leave.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't his weapon, it was Atreus' arrow.
Yeah.
But he drops it. It's basically his way of leaving, and then he has to get in the side comment, which for how they wrote Heimdall, it's not accurate to lore Heimdall, but for game Heimdall, you are a sick man.
Yeah.
He's barking because he knows he can't win if he has to use his bite.
Right. Yeah.
Against Thor, no.
Okay, and then the part where Othin shows up.
Oh, Othin shows up, and he walks over to Loki, and he's like, "Oh, Loki, you came. I'm so happy." And then Heimdall and then he's like, to Loki, he says basically something along the lines of, "I see you've met Heimdall. He reads minds for me." And then Heimdall comes up from behind on the left side, and he's like, All Father, I must protest," or something like that. And then Odin turns around, and he's like, "He's my guest. Why is he covered in mud?" And Heimdall's like, "He means to betray you." And Odin's like, like a really over-the-top gasp, and turns around. He's like, "Is that true, Loki? Are you going to betray me? Are you a little trickster?" And Loki starts, and Odin's like,
well, and the best part was it this part or was it the next part where he actually just kind of, oh, no, it was the next part.
Yes, and then Odin basically goes, "I'm just messing around. Of course he's going to betray me." And in this scene, the body movements, like Odin obviously knew that Heimdall switched from being behind him on the left side to behind him on the right side.
Right.
And,
well, actually from behind him on the left side to his right side, which is his blind side.
Yes.
And you can see from the body language when Heimdall makes that step, Othin actually shifts his weight to make room for Heimdall to stand there.
But then he's trying to seem unassuming, so he pretends he didn't notice, which you even get a smirk from Heimdall that he outplayed the Allfather, but then Heimdall very quickly realizes that Othin's just putting on a charade for Loki.
Yes.
And then he's like, "Of course he means to betray me. I've given him no reason to trust me." And then he sends Thor away, and Thor doesn't even want to be there. And then he sends Heimdall away, and Heimdall protests. And then he turns to Loki, and he's like, "Were you planning on killing me first thing?" And then Loki shrugs.
Yeah. It's really subtle, but it's there. Was you planning on killing me straight away?
And he's like,
I mean, he didn't make the sound, but that's kind of what it looked like was, meh, maybe.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, and actually, the fact that he was willing to be honest about it is probably endeared him further. But yes, Othin is using Loki. But here's the thing. This is why, even though people know they're getting used by Othin, or other gods know they're getting used by Othin, they'll still play along, is because you can still get something out of it. Othin just benefits more. It's like, to use the old line, boss makes $1, I make a dime. That's pretty much how it works with Othin. You might get a payoff. You might also get completely screwed. But you might get a payoff. His is going to be bigger.
Right. Well, and then another wonderful thing, though, was actually the way that they did Loki. Atreus is
Atreus is the Greek name, and Loki is his Jotun name.
Yeah. But the way that they did Loki was wonderful. It's fine that they made him a youth, because typically he's portrayed without a beard anyways.
Which is basically how we depict our youthful gods.
Right. So they chose that, and it's a video game, so whatever. But one, they didn't make him evil. Does he do things that's not necessarily right or the most beneficial? Yeah. But he's also a kid, but he's doing what he thinks is right, regardless of the cost.
Well, and it's actually lore accurate. A lot of what gets Loki in trouble in the Eddas is he's too emotionally invested. So he'll do the right thing from an emotional perspective. Like there's one, the myth of Thiazi. Loki, Honir, and Odin are all wandering around.
Which isn't in the video game, by the way.
No, Honir's not in the video game, oddly. But they're going around. They're traveling distant lands. They're hungry. They can't find any food. They finally find food. They start cooking it. Thiazi won't let it cook, and it shows up as a giant eagle. He says, I'll let it cook if you'll give me a share. They agree, and then Thiazi basically tries to eat all of it. So Loki and his friends have been wandering around. They're all hungry. This fucking asshole's eating all of it. So what does Loki do? He hits him with the cooking spoon. Like, fuck you, asshole. And then giant magic. Loki is stuck to the spoon. The spoon is stuck to the giant in giant eagle form, and then he flies off.
Right, which then leads to a whole nother mess.
Yes.
Of which, shame on the other gods, because they never even went looking for Loki.
Yes. Well, it's...
But anyways, yeah, they did excellent with Loki because he plays that perfect blend between, like, pulling nature and mankind together.
Which is kind of how Loki works. I've even done posts on this. Is Loki is kind of where nature and people meet. So, like, using fire to start a fire, to build a hearth. He's not the fire. He's not the hearth. He's not even the house with the hearth. He is the very fact that you used all these elements of nature to make the house and make the fire.
Yeah.
Using the wolves or sled dogs, and then treating them well because they are doing something for you. It's only fair that you treat them well in return.
Yeah.
Like, he's very empathetic and kind and trying to do the right thing.
Well, like in the game, he releases Garmer. There's multiple reasons to release Garmer from Helheim, who's chained down in front of a...
They combined Garm and Fenrir.
Yeah,
That's another little thing.
It's not exactly lore accurate, but I'm talking about the nature of the who Loki is. And he ends up freeing Garmer, which causes problems. Then what does he do? Just like the Loki in the various stories, he goes and corrects the problem.
Yes, he creates the problem on accident, but he corrects it on purpose.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is because the character is a youth. He's probably, about 12 to 14 years old-ish?
I think he's 14 in this game.
Okay. He has the emotional temperament of an actual 14-year-old that is competent. He's like, I am competent. I can do these things. I am a dangerous person. Why won't you show me the respect of listening to me and taking my thoughts and considerations at full adult value? And then he has the temper tantrum of a young teenage boy that is competent, which is exactly why he's not taken at full adult value.
He's not stable enough. He's capable enough, but he's not stable enough. And it's actually established really early on when his wolf, Fenrir, his wolf, one of the sled wolves, dies. And then he refuses to train, which what Kratos is doing when he offers to train after that, or says we should go train, is you have to be able to fight through your grief.
Yeah.
The very fact that he's like, he has a temper tantrum.
He succumbs to his grief instead, which is exactly because he succumbs to his grief. He yells at his father, at Kratos, about why is it always about training, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. He's upset, and justly so. But that is exactly why Kratos wanted him to train. Whether this was the intention of the writers or not doesn't matter, because it was well written, and that's what it is. It's Kratos wanted him to train because he's in such deep grief. He has to be able to fight in that emotional state. But because Loki can't do it, that is why he must keep training, because he's not ready yet.
Well, and getting on to some other characters, that like the dwarves, Brock and Sindri. These are two important figures from the Eddas. They're the ones that made a lot of... They're not the only ones. There's also, I think, the Sons of Ivaldi is another set of dwarves. I don't think they show up in the video game. But Brock and Sindri made a lot of cool stuff for the gods. I think they made Draupnir. I think they made Mjolnir. I'm not sure. I can't remember which dwarves made which set.
They took almost nothing from the stories and created well thought out, well portrayed characters, rounded out characters.
Well, and to put it another way, they took everything they could from the stories from these figures that had almost nothing.
Right.
I think they did that with Brock and Sindri. They also did it with Thrudr, Thor's daughter. They did really good with her.
Mm-hmm. I would have went a different direction, but I don't have a problem with the direction that they went.
No, they actually, and this is the thing.
They almost went the direction that I think they should have went with Thrudr. But let's talk about the dwarves first.
But Brock and Sindri, they took this little bit that they had about them, and then they went and made fully fleshed out characters. And that makes them more likable. It gives them life. It breathes life back into our gods. And yes, the dwarves are a type of god. They're just a type of god that typically isn't actively venerated, at least on an individual basis.
Right, and I would have had them do some really neat things with the dwarves. Maybe, well, for instance, I'll just dive into it. I'm not really putting a time limit on this one because it's probably going to be a long time before we do something like this again. But one of the things I would have done for the dwarves, because there's almost no physical descriptions of the dwarves, and most people are stuck on the Tolkien dwarf, and dwarves are giants, but they're gods, but they're also dwarves, right? So what does this mean? What I would have done is, when introducing the dwarves, at some point I would have had one of the dwarves look like a person standing in front of an anvil working stuff, right? Because why not? That's what dwarves do. They make magical stuff.
They make breastplates out of dog barks.
Right, which is actually, and even the dwarf himself is, I don't even quite understand that one. But what I would have done is, you got the dwarf working at the anvil and the forge and all this stuff. And the person walks in and everything looks normal size. And then the dwarf sees them, walks towards them, just takes a couple, like 3-4 steps. And then he's dwarf size. Then you have the character get close to the anvil that they was working on, and the anvil is 2 to 3. Just the anvil is 2 to 3 times as tall as the character.
Because
and actually address it like, well, what's going on, and just have the dwarf be like, oh yeah, we're as big as we need to be.
Which is actually something I liked about one of the few times I actually liked how the Norse lore was depicted in the MCU was the dwarf in Endgame, I think it was, or Infinity War, one of those two. But the dwarf was enormous. Mm-hmm. The dwarf can be anywhere from very small to very big.
Right.
Much like the Jotuns, the Aesir, the Vanir, whatever. They're just subcategories of the gods. They're all gods.
Right. But my way of doing it, I think, would have showed they're all of these things and none of these things. They are dwarves. And because I would have had them, because you had God of War 4, and they got a bit of a relationship going on there, right? Have them become friends, and then the dwarf reveal the secret. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small. Well, why would you ever want to be smaller than everyone else? Why? To set them at ease. It gives me an advantage.
Set them at ease. Maybe I want to get somewhere specifically, because another thing I like how they did the dwarves, they can be where they have the ability to go between the realms, and actually the house of Brock and Sindri in the game is between the realms. It's on Yggdrasil. Yeah. Their landlord, quote unquote, is Ratatoskr.
Right. Which is, there's an issue with that, but we'll leave that issue alone, which is the voice actor.
Oh,
they
yeah.
shouldn't have done that.
But I like how they depicted Ratatoskr.
Yeah.
How he's the caretaker of the tree. Because squirrels are actually caretakers of forests. They're not... I don't know how the Christians convinced people that a squirrel was evil, but they did it somehow.
Right. Yeah, I don't get it.
I don't know.
Well, and the thing I didn't like about Ratatoskr was he talks about how he has aspects of himself. No.
That's not how that works.
That's not how that works, and that shouldn't have been there. But, whatever.
I think that was a rewrite because they had Ratatoskr as a spirit animal in the first game, but then they wanted Ratatoskr solid, so they're like, we have to figure out how to have both.
So this is a case of bad writing and not having an actual understanding and working with the common perception.
Well,
because most people will say, well, the aspects of the gods. So the game writers just ran with that.
Well, it's one of the biggest issues, and this was present in God of War 4 and God of War 5, but I gotta say it because it's an elephant in the room, is they made friggin' Freya the same deity.
Yeah.
And they did it for the same reason as...
well, it's a common perception issue.
It's a common perception is one of the issues, but there's also... Having Frigg completely changes how they write the story. So it's much like why did Wagner have Idun and Freya be the same goddess? For the story they wanted to tell, having both becomes clutter.
Yeah.
So it's not lore accurate, but they did it because they basically wanted to cut down their cast of characters. And their cast of characters is really small. Like they only have like 7 or 8 of the big named gods. And then they actually, credit where credit's due, they have a lot of the small ones. Like they have Sif, they have Bela, they have Bigvir.
Mm-hmm.
They have all these minor gods that most people
and they
forget
round
about.
most of them out
fairly
well.
I mean,
for the screen time.
Oh yeah.
Like the more screen time they get, the more rounded out they are. Like Brock is one of my favorite characters. The undead dwarf.
Basically, he's like a half dead. He's almost like a Draugr dwarf, basically. And then you also have Freyr.
But I don't like the fact that he's a Draugr dwarf. I like the character. That description of him that they do is kind of fucked.
Well, I think it's a way.
But I like the character himself.
Well, I wonder if it wasn't because they made him blue in the first game, and then if you notice, none of the other dwarves are blue.
Yeah. So then they got to explain it.
Which really, the explanation they had in the first game, which was implied, which is the dwarves are supposedly underground all the time, so they don't necessarily have the same color skin. So it's just basically, why would a dwarf necessarily?
I would have given him silver poisoning.
Silver poisoning, because that's actually a thing. Like the entire family in America that got silver poisoning, they all turned into Smurfs, basically.
Yeah, giant Smurfs. But I like Brock's. He's that really gruff uncle. And
then
I can't think of some of the smart ass things that he says through the game.
Oh,
but
my favorite is the one where
that's less than. Frick, I can't remember. Anyways, go ahead.
My favorite one was when he sees Atreus Loki again. And he's like, "What is that thing?"
Oh yeah.
And then he's like, "What? You know him? This is my son." Well, what happened to him? He's much bigger, and he looks like that.
Which is beautiful when you take into account how rare mirrors are.
Yes.
So you have a teenage boy who's already self-conscious, and he looks like that, implying that he's ugly, and he's not, but implying that he's really ugly just to make him uncomfortable and uncertain.
Well, that's another thing they kind of hint at is Loki's a bit of a ladies' man, because he has the love interest with Angerboda.
No, and Angry Booty.
Angry Booty, Angerboda.
Angry Booty.
The race bent Angerboda, unfortunately. Though I like how they wrote Angerboda. I don't like how they depicted Angry Booty.
She's got an angry booty.
But
I got so frustrated with it, I had to make up a song.
Especially because she ends up the custodian of Fenrir. That was not a positive.
Yeah.
And then he's also got this friendship, love interest thing with Thruder. Loki is a bit of a ladies' man. And actually there is some depictions or references in the mythology where, at least his early myths, Loki is a youth. He's a prodigy youth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I don't have a problem with it, is because there's a breadth of lore, I guess, on Loki where he's described through many stages of life. So anywhere from too young to grow a beard to having a beard that's like long and flowy, which implies that he's of a different tribe from, like, I think potentially the Celts, because you've seen some of the, like, on YouTube, some of the Celtic storytellers, and it's like their beards have a life of their own.
Oh yeah, it's a
different beard from the Scandinavians.
Well, that actually
a different
brings
beard
me
from the Germans.
Well, let's bring up Kratos, because this is actually something we noticed. The way Kratos' beard is designed is really similar to mine.
Which is a Hessian beard.
Yes.
There's even some photographic evidence to support that.
Yes. Like, yes, Kratos is Spartan, but his beard, however they ended up with that design, looks just like a Hessian's beard at that length.
Right. It doesn't look like a Greek beard.
No, Greek beards, there's Thousands of freaking statues depicting what a Greek beard looks like.
If you want to know what a Greek beard looks like, look at some of those statues.
And on top of it, the mosaics and pottery, because it's pretty consistent, the texture and growth pattern of their beard.
Yeah.
But I've had people, because of my beard looks a lot like Kratos's, and because I'm big and broad, I'm not as broad as Kratos. I got to work on that. Actually, compare me to Kratos. Like, we just had it happen not too long ago with a girl at the store. Oh wow, you look a lot like Kratos. And then I had some other people have asked me, oh, you should have gone as Kratos for Halloween. And it's when you get
becoming a thing.
Yes, it's becoming a thing. And basically, even though Kratos is a fictional god, the closest he comes to godhood is in the story. He acts as a vehicle for which the other god stories can be told. He has his own story, but it's us living vicariously through Kratos. And yes, we're all the godkin. We're all related to the gods in some form. But being compared in that way, it's a lot like the older guys that get compared to Santa Claus.
Right.
You can either own it or you can be repulsed by it. And really, usually the better option is to embrace it. And because you remind people of that god, you're under an obligation to actually represent it in the best way possible. Like you right now, you kind of have a golden mane.
Yeah, I'm not old enough to do the whole Santa Claus thing, but I am preparing now to be the powerful Santa Claus, not the fat Santa Claus, the powerful Santa Claus.
Oh yeah, and that's a whole nother topic. But Santa Claus is quickly going to like power lifter build warrior.
Yeah,
much less. He's basically like frozen Christmas Thor in many ways. That's kind of how his depictions.
Yeah,
that's kind of how his depictions are trending.
And yeah, I mean, there was so much with this game. Thruder, by the way, her name translates to what is it? Strength and or power,
something along those lines.
And they almost did the way I would have done her, because they took it literally, where she's got the sword, she kind of flips it around. I don't even think she ever actually uses it in the movie version that we watched.
She does, but it's
but she makes it look light.
Yes.
And then she sets it down, and Loki can't even pick it up because she's so physically strong.
Well, she's the daughter of Thor. Of course she's strong.
She's the daughter of Thor. But I myself would have made her physically just a female. So much like her mother physically.
Oh, yeah, and they did Sif's design really well.
But the power, the strength and power that I would have given her would have just been strength and power of will and personality.
Fortitude, courage.
Right. Because I would have had her not... Okay. When she says, will you hand me that cup? You hand her the cup because she asked you to hand her the cup. And she almost did this with Thor, and then they threw the ball.
Yes.
They dropped it.
They dropped it.
Because she's like, you are going to go here and you're going to do this thing. And all they needed to do was say, because it needs done.
Well, and
instead they had her evoke Othin's name.
Well, just like Loki, she is still a youth. She's a young. She's not even technically a maiden quite yet because she's still a little too young. But she's almost there. It's on the cusp. But one of the things I loved about Thruder's design wasn't just that she's strong. Wasn't just that she has the woman's mane.
Yeah.
The wild, windswept hair that really we've actually been encouraging.
Bloody sea foam.
Yes. Like we've actually been encouraging not only the men to grow their beards out, to have their mane so they stop maiming themselves, but also our women. Because our women have a mane too, but it's just it doesn't grow from their face, until they're like 62.
Well, right. and her hair was long, but it wasn't ridiculously long.
Well, yeah. As soon as you can start wiping your ass with your hair, it's a little long, unless you have the respect and authority of other people. It's a mark of like the crone in some tribes.
Yeah, it's a status symbol at that point.
Yes.
Because it does get to a point where it requires a small crew to take care of it.
Yes, which is why typically it would be a mark of the crone. Right. Is the older crone would have the long hair, which actually brings us to the Norns.
Yes, I love the Norns in there. Their character design was absolute garbage.
They made them look like trolls.
Goaty trolls.
Yes.
But
Their dialogue.
Their dialogue was epic. I loved the dialogue because it was so
fitting.
Yeah, so fitting for the Norns.
Well, you had Erder, who's the oldest one. She is talking like this person who has written the story, or is writing the story, or has already read most of the story. Then Verdani is acting like a narrator. And then you have Skuld, who is what should be, or what could be. She's basically repeating...
and just straight power flexes all the way through it.
Oh, yeah. The Norns very clearly throughout the entire scene establish, we're the fricking Norns.
Right, and who's the youngest one again?
Skuld.
Skuld. They do this, or she does this thing where as they're speaking, like just before they say it, she says what they're going to say, which is a pure power flex.
Well, and one thing I love about the Norns is first of all, the way they speak. How they talk like they're narrators / story writers.
Right. But they didn't do that Weird Sisters thing where they're each one, like in the play, each one is like the conversation is going around in a circle where one says I, and the next one now says am, and the next one says talking.
Unless they're all talking to each other, then they'll have a conversation. But
right,
yeah, like
they didn't get stupid with it.
Well, no, they're not basing it off the Weird Sisters. Which, yes, the Weird Sisters are partially based off the Norns, but the way I basically categorize them is because the Norns are the big three, and then there's the other Norns, which are like the lesser Norns. I categorize the Weird Sisters as
the Weird
some of the
Sisters
other
is more like what that one actress did in
Macbeth.
And in the Macbeth movie, where it's 3 minds, 1 body, or 3 bodies, 1 mind. You can look at it either way. Either way, it causes like a schizophrenic thing.
Oh yeah, the Weird Sisters are weird.
Yeah,
but the
Norns, man, that was
good, because like I love that Erder actually refers to them as piteous archetypes, because from their perspective, that's what they are.
Yeah.
I mean, even when Kratos is leaving, Erder even says, "I've enjoyed your story, Kratos of Sparta. A pity it has to end so soon." And the reason they say that is because they've been around so long that because they know what choices you're going to make, they can predict what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's even directly referenced. Like,
just because your choices are the fact that your choices are so predictable is what merely makes us seem prescient.
Yes, because they're not.
No, they just are really, really good at observing what is said. And then that's another thing I like is when Verdani and Erder are talking, they talk about how they're the Kratos and Freya are over-focusing on the second act to the...
there's some meta commentary.
Oh, yeah, they over-focus on the second act to the problem of the finale, and then Erder makes the side comment, a common mistake in storycraft.
Yes. Which is, it's epic.
Oh, yes.
The entirety of that scene is fantastic, with the exception of the character design.
Even their hall.
Even their hall is good.
Yes. I mean, they're not really at a well unless you count the fact that they're literally underwater. Like, they had to go underwater to reach the Norns.
Which some of the stories, sure.
Well, yeah, there's like the 3 heads in the well fairy tale where they're literally, for some reason, the Norns are 3 heads bobbing in a well.
Yeah.
It's odd.
There's different versions of it, but yeah, it was good. And they took into account not just one type of story or one storyline. They tied in many old stories to tell a new story.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious they used the Eddas as the baseline, but they clearly did a lot more research to flesh it out.
And we're cheating this time. We're using notes.
Which is something we almost never do.
Never
but
do.
This one we really wanted to. Another thing that I really liked, and this is more in the 4th game, a lot of people got mad at how Baldur's depicted. No, it makes perfect sense.
His attitude and whatnot makes perfect sense. My issue was with the way his character design was.
He's too old.
He should have been literally young.
Well, he should have looked more like Heimdall does in this game, or even younger.
I would say even younger. He should. I don't know how old Atreus Loki was in the first game, but he should have been the same age.
I think he was like
physically.
9 or 10 in the first game.
He should have been preteen. Baldur should have been physically in Game 4, which was the game that he was in. And the reason being is because his mother basically locked him in time so he would never feel pain. He can't die. He can't feel pain. That includes growing pains.
Yes, because to get more muscle, you need to break up your muscle flesh, your meat.
Right. To grow taller, your bones, basically, they have to break.
Yes, they have to break and then grow from the breakage. And you can't feel anything because here's the thing. Pleasure and pain are the same sensation. Your brain just processes it differently. So he becomes an unfeeling mess that can't be harmed. So he becomes insane. His mind is gone, as Othin put it. And that is so accurate. And here's the thing is, he is talented. Baldur is talented, but he's also the golden child. So he's a bit of a brat,
right?
Which is how he behaves.
Which my thing would have, my character design of him would have really screamed golden child, because he would have had the blonde cub fur, because they made him dirty blonde,
which is actually more of
made
an
him look
blonde.
Like a drugged out street urchin,
which is I think supposed to be like he's stressed, because he still has emotional pain,
right?
Because nothing's hurting him,
right? But he would have had the physicality of a child, and he would have looked sweet and innocent and golden, but his brain is broken. That would have made it even more intense storytelling tool.
I think they probably didn't go that route, because I think people would probably be like, beating a child.
Oh, they're advocating child abuse.
Yeah, something like that.
You do fight as...
Kind of reminds me of would you like to donate $1 for fighting children with diabetes?
Oh, yes, I want to do that.
And just,
would you like a brick, a bat,
or
stick?
A shoe? You can use my shoe to beat little Timmy.
All right.
But
to fight children with diabetes. I love that.
And there are gods that are depicted as children. Puck's not technically a god, but he also technically is. But Puck is typically depicted as a child.
Well, yeah.
Except in this game, where they made
he
Mimir
scoffs
Puck.
at gods.
Oh, yeah. There's so much right. And it's not that it's not full of problems. It is.
Yes.
But I'm so used to problems. Focusing on the good is what I've decided to do.
Right.
Because I can use the good. I've gotten people to grin ear to ear using Thor, describing Othin using the game. It gets people engaged. They're doing all the work for us. We just have to parse out the bullshit.
We have to figure out how to use it.
Precisely.
And they did mix some stuff up, but one of the things I liked is it's after the super duper magical spear was made, right?
Oh, Kratos asks for a blessing from Brock.
And that's where he says, and Brock's like, no, insert made-up problem.
Insert plot convenience.
So it won't work. And then Kratos says...
it is the nature of a thing that matters, not its form.
Right, thank you. It is the nature of a thing that matters, not its form.
And
or it is not the form. Yeah, that's the way he said it. He said it's not the nature of the thing, it's its form.
And then Brock gives a traditional Celtic blacksmith blessing.
Yeah, right, a traditional Celtic blacksmith blessing, which is, may this weapon strike true.
May it be wielded with wisdom.
Yeah, you read it. I'm getting choked up.
May it be put down when its job is done. And then he spits on it.
Right.
Which that's one of the reasons.
And it's done usually at the culmination of its creation. It can either be while it's being tempered, or the last time that the smith, say a sword, puts the sword in the sheath. But the last time that the smith is going to be working on it, at the last moment, he will then utter this for what he is hoping will be a legendary weapon. And read that again, because I was talking while he was doing it.
May this weapon strike true. May it be wielded with wisdom. May it be put down when its job is done.
It's... Wow. It was actually kind of intense if you know what you're looking at. And I know most people, they see that and they're like, oh, wow, man, that's deep. And then they just keep on moving and promptly forget about it.
Well, another thing I just loved about a lot of how the game's designed is it's lived in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there is an obvious overall culture here. Yes, they kind of use a bunch of different plot conveniences to not have a lot of NPCs running around, but it's lived in. It feels like an actual culture. I mean, yes, it's simplified down for video game content, but whatever. But like simple things like the design of the shrines they come across.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually a traditional shrine design. You can actually find like old German wooden carved shrines that look like that.
Which were actually wardrobes.
And that's another thing you liked, is they actually refer to them as wardrobes.
Because that's what they were.
Or how Atreus Loki learns the stories. They're told in just every day, either as entertainment or because it's relevant to something, or they visit a shrine and they learn the story because the shrine has the story.
Let's call it what it is. They visit a wardrobe.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Which it also is a shrine because it just means that there's a story there. So I mean, some of the
pragmatic.
shrines, right? Some of the shrines are like the equivalent of cave paintings and etchings on various stone faces. And then other ones are like those wardrobes or chests, because there's a couple of them where, and I'm not sure if it's 4 or 5, but they open up the chest, and then there's these story bits, and then you have to fold them out to get more and more of the story. These things actually existed, but they were of pragmatic use. It wasn't like, because the Catholic Church has imitated that. But they use it, and they put like a cross in there and a chalice in there and 3 candles and the incense. They put that crap in there. What our people did was put their clothes in it, their weaponry in it. They used it as a like functional thing.
Kind of like those, I don't know how many countries have these, but like around here where I'm from, we'll have these mini libraries where you can leave a book and you can take a book, and they're usually in the shape of small houses.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is it the ones that it's like a small house on a pole?
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's not executed necessarily very well, but it's a good idea, and it's actually a continuation of that, similar to like the wayside shrines that are where people's car crashes or something.
Right.
And one of the things I loved about the design of the shrines is they're wordless. You can tell the story, but you have to act. It's a visual accent. It allows you to tell the story from it. And the way the stories are told, like they'll be in a boat ride, and then Kratos tells stuff from, Loki's Greek ancestry or Atreus's Greek ancestry. And then he also grew up hearing stories from his mother, which I kind of like how they ended up rationalizing Laufey, which is Loki's mother in the Eddic lore, and Cruel Striker or Farbauti, which is his father, which we have almost nothing on. And basically what they did was they made Kratos Farbauti or Cruel Striker. And then Faye, his wife, is Laufey, which is a giantess. Mm-hmm. And Loki grew up hearing stories from his giant mother. And then when she died, he started hearing Greek stories from his father. And then when Mimir comes in, when they have the head of Mimir, who is for some reason like a Celtic satyr, again, focusing on the positive, Mimir then tells him the story, and there's actual scenes, like I think you might have brought this up already, where Mimir tells the story of like Emir's death and the near wiping out of the Jotuns, but Bergelmir survives with his wife, and they go forward. And while he's talking about how
which is an actual story, by the way.
Yes.
I don't know if it's in Edda's, but I know it's an actual story.
It's
and his vengeance, and his vengeance is going to be that he lives a good life.
Yes, the giants continue to live despite Emir's blood just almost washing them away. Mm-hmm. And while he's telling the story, Atreus touches the water because it's the blood of the giant, because they're on a boat in the scene. And then he wipes away a tear at the end and comments on it's rare to hear a happy story, especially a true one. And Mimir's like, it's because they're very rare.
Yeah.
Happy stories that are true are very rare.
Well, it reminds me of a conversation we had a while ago, because I was telling a lot of different Celtic is it Babylonian? Avalon, anyways. Stories from Avalon and part of continental Europe. But that spread, and I was telling a bunch of stories, and the comment was made is, so many sorry to get a little emotional, so many of them are sad. They're depressing. They stir up feelings of anger and sorrow. Yes.
That's part of their point.
That's most of our stories. Which, when there are the happy ones, enjoy them. Like the happy ones where it's just funny. Thor getting a dress, he's tricking the giants and to get his hammer back. It's a funny story.
The paper-thin disguise.
Enjoy it because it's a rarity amongst our people.
Which is why we're so irreverent.
Yes.
It's why we're so irreverent with the gods. Why we have stories of, like, Thor in a wedding dress or the Dagda plowing the earth with his giant dick.
Yeah. There's some absolutely ridiculous stories, and we need those ones, too.
We need the little lights. It's like this game especially showed us that video games in current culture are the single best way to tell the stories.
Right. Now, should you spend 4, 5, 12 hours a day playing video games? Probably not. 1 or 2 hours a day just to unwind, and then do the rest of your day doing real things. 1 or 2 hours at the outside a day isn't going to hurt you. A couple hours a week is probably better. Video games are just fine, just so long as, like anything else,
well, it's
there's
like
a balance.
There's a very big difference between watching a couple episodes of a show on, like, a day versus binge watching it and not sleeping all night because you had to watch the first 3 seasons of The Office.
Right.
And
then you do that every day.
Well, and
because even doing it once in a while, like binge watch. I am doing nothing today other than watching TV and playing video games.
I am finally catching up on Friends Season 2.
Right. And you do that once a month, that isn't an issue. When you do it
all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Escapism.
It becomes a problem.
It's escapism versus just winding down. You're
Right.
allowed to wind down at the end of the day.
It's okay to relax.
You're allowed to take a snifter of whiskey and, I don't know, watch Braveheart.
Yeah.
You're allowed to just relax.
Mm-hmm.
It's necessary.
It's just fine. So don't feel guilty about playing video games. But if you're playing them, if it becomes like a drug and you have to, stop for a while. But back to this game, it's the cutscenes and stuff like that is what we watched. It was laid out in like a movie, and it had some of the gameplay, but only the pertinent
only
gameplay.
Enough to keep the plot moving.
Right.
But it told me just, this is, unless we could get the oral storytelling tradition restarted, which for some reason is so hard to get people to be like, I'll actually learn this so I can recite it. Mm-hmm. Even I sometimes have trouble trying to get that memorization of the stories down. Video games are the single best because you get invested in the characters. You have to work for that cutscene. And then there's all these little bits, and like especially the lore whores among video games. Like that's why there's entire like years worth out once you add up all the time of just lore videos out there of Fallout or World of Warcraft or any of these other popular video game franchises. And this alone, like I think I've already said this, but even if everything else had been just fucked, just the physical design for Thor has started to reset people in how they depict Thor. You're going to start seeing less of the Marvel Baldur Thor and more of actual Thor.
Right. Well, and as people like the characters, they're going to zigzag back and forth. But the gods are going to come back to mean because people just like them that way. Most people are actually more drawn to this Thor physically than the Baldur Thor, than the MCU Thor. And some people are actually liking him better because they're like, oh, I didn't know he was a family man. Which then comes back to the thing that I was saying in our last podcast. Our people learn from stories. It doesn't matter. That's why we have a responsibility when we're storytelling. People are learning from this. They are going to learn both the good and the bad, which when we as heathens, as followers of the Hyperborean ethnic faith, if we do stories, we have to do them right. We don't have to retell the old story. We can tell new stories. That's just fine. But when we describe Thor, it has to be Thor, and they did that in this game. It's the heartbroken, angry Thor, but it's Thor.
Well, and it's the same with Othin. It's Othin. He has more power than
right up until the end.
Yeah, and then he becomes Mega Gandalf.
Right.
Or Mega Dumbledore, because the whole fireball, not very common.
Which I wanted to end the episode with how I would redo the last fight. Right. So is there anything else that you want?
One last bit is the design of Freyr and Freya.
Oh, yeah.
It's inaccurate. They're not supposed to be brunette. And for some reason, even though they have a white guy playing Freyr, they take him like right up to the edge of looking Native American.
Yeah, as close as I could without quite getting there. The concept art actually had him full on looking that way.
Yes, heya.
With the even with the leather clothes that the Native Americans never had.
Yes, they did update the design. It's sort of like I was worried about the Thor design because they gave him the fat guy chest in the concept art.
Right.
But then the final game, no, they got the musculature. But
they fixed it ish.
But like both Freyr and Freya have like wheat colored hair in the lore. At most you could do like dishwater blonde or dirty blonde. But it's more like a wheat or rye or straw color. But that's my most minor gripe. Other than that, like Freyr being kind of impulsive but competent, it's accurate. Him giving up his magic sword that fights for itself, that was accurate. And he also gives up his ship, which, again, how impulsive he is and how little value he puts on things, which is another thing. Well,
he cares more about people than things.
Which is very evident in the whole thing.
Well, and it's very much part of our people.
Which is partly why Freyr used to be so valued. He was extremely important.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just because he gave everything away.
No, he's a god of bounty, of abundance. He's very kind.
Yeah.
And
brave.
Brave, too, because the mother fricker is leading a rebellion in the game armed with but an antler.
Oh, another thing that I loved about the game was the giants were not evil. At most, they didn't care. Like when they meet Surtur.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to help you. Well, why not? Well, because I don't want to.
Oh, I love the line when they're asking him why he won't join with Sinmara, who's his consort in the lore, to become Ragnarok, because they do a whole thing with that.
Yeah, they do.
Game.
Ragnarok is a giant.
He has a line where Atreus is asking, like, well, why won't you do this? And he's like, have you ever been in love, kid? It's pretty good.
yeah. And then he even points out, like, he can't understand because he just hasn't lived long enough. It's not because he's not smart. It's just because he hasn't lived long enough. He hasn't had enough experience.
Well, and actually, I want to go back, just edge back to Freyr for a sec, because the design of the antler, they went the best possible route. They did like the Scottish antler
well, like
dagger.
in Braveheart.
Yeah, like William Wallace stabs the guy. That's the antler they used.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally made from an antler, but it's a functional weapon. He uses it like a dagger.
Right.
I freaking love that.
It was beautiful.
Because I've never seen someone depict it well. Because they'll always go like just full-on antlers or something.
Yeah, they'll do the full antler as if it's a sword, and that just doesn't work.
No, I mean, have you ever tried to lift an antler? It doesn't work very well.
Well, it would spin in your hand. There's all kinds of problems with it as a weapon, as a full
it's
antler
poorly
as
balanced.
a weapon. Yeah,
but a dagger.
It works really good on a deer's head, though.
Yes, but if you get it the right shape and the right size, you can use it as a pretty effective dagger.
Yeah.
And he also, I think he even tied like something so he'd have like a bit of a hilt to it.
Yeah. It's a good design. They put some thought into it. They obviously looked at some history, or at least watched Braveheart. And they're like, hey, that makes sense.
But yes, we can finally go to how he would have fixed the Mega Gandalf boss battle with Othin at the end.
Oh, yeah. At the end. There's an issue with the storytelling, and there's an issue with the power scaling. But Othin does say, when he's defeated before the actual battle, he's like, this is disappointing, but no, I'm not going to fight you because this isn't going to stop me. I am going to keep doing this. I'll just find a different way to do this thing. And then they attack him anyways, and he becomes super powerful Gandalf, all-father, zappy guy that can tank Kratos' hits like it's nothing. It's bad. I'm fine with them fighting Othin just out of vengeance. Like, you have pissed us off and now you will pay. Okay, fair enough. So what I would have had them do is, because they use ravens as portals, which is a plot convenience. Thank you. I keep trying to say device for some reason. It's a plot convenience. It's just, again, point A to point B really quickly without having to actually walk there. It's not lore accurate, but it's a freaking video game, so I'm okay with it.
They got to have some way to explain the mechanics.
Right. So what I would have had Othin do, okay, if we're going to fight, we're going to do this right. And on my turf, and then have the portal thing, the Raven portal, come up and teleport them to his actual hall, not to Valhalla. That's an Eddic thing, but most of the lore actually has a different hall for Othin.
Well,
Othin, the beggar king, the real Othin,
with the hustlers, the desperate, the whores, the drunkards,
all the
gamblers,
all
the thieves,
most,
and
as
beggars.
Othin would call them, the most interesting people in the world. And that he would have taken them to his hall. He would have been a glass cannon. Kratos hit him once, he dies. The problem with it is he can transfer into any one of his followers. He has a hall full of interesting people.
And a very large amount of them.
And an extremely large amount of them. So what I would have done for the boss fight, and I'm sure some people will go watch the boss fight. They might even beat it already. But rather than the boss fight that we got, I would have done this and portal into his hall, the Hall of the Desperate. That's what I'll call it because so far as I know, there is no name for it. It's just Othin's Hall. Land there, the fight start. Let you get the first hit on Othin. Poof. Oh, he's dead. Wait, no, he's not. And then have all of the desperate people pouring out because you're fighting their god. And jump on Kratos. So you'd be fighting as Kratos, and it's death by 1,000 cuts. You can't ignore them because they will whittle your health away. They will kill you if you do nothing about them, so you have to fight them. And then every time that you strike Odin or Othin, he turns into another one of these things, but from behind you and stabs you in the back, ripping off a good chunk of your health. So you have to stay mobile. You have to keep twisting and turning and finding him and then attacking him.
With all the sounds that Othin's Hall would have in the background.
All the laughter, the screams of pleasure, the cries of desperation.
You've got an ace hidden up your sleeve, you bastard.
Right, the anger, the drunken gibbering. All the sounds that all these people would make at all the times. Playing in the background. So I guess from a Christian perspective, it'd be hellish. But from our perspective, it's like, oh, they haven't stopped partying just to fight him. They're fighting him and partying still.
Well, that's another thing I liked. They made Othin a trickster.
Yeah.
He's a trickster. For some reason, everyone freaking avoids the idea of Othin being a trickster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
he is a tricky trickster that is...
He's a very
liar
good
and a
trickster.
manipulator. They come right out in the video game and call him a liar.
Well, what did they say? If he tells you snow is white, he's lying?
Yeah. But that's the way I had the end fight go, and you have to hit him whatever it is that they'd give the cap. I would say 200 times just to show his sheer power and the devotion of his followers. But if they decide 200 is too many times, okay, well, screw it. You have to kill him 50 times, whatever.
Well,
but that's the way I had the fight go, and it would have made it really hard, and it would have been a lore-accurate fight-ish.
Well, and actually it would have been better because one of the biggest complaints people have is when they do a lot of side quests and they over-level so they can beat the boss pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't matter how high your level was.
It would still be hard.
Because you'd still have to take out 200 separate individuals just to beat him.
Right. Well, and granted, it only takes one hit per, but it's finding him, hitting him, surviving the stabs to the back when you get stabbed in the back. It would show just how utterly dangerous Othin is and why he is respected is probably stretching it. But people pay attention to him because he is dangerous. He is not physically dangerous. He is mentally, emotionally dangerous. He is a dangerous person. But in straight up combat, not so much.
No, danger comes in many forms.
But yeah, that would have showed a level of danger that nobody ever applies to Othin. He is his followers. His followers are him. And they are the truly desperate. They have nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Well, he is the beggar king, the king of the beggars, the thieves, the desperate, and the hanged. And
they've already lost everything.
What do they have to lose?
Yeah. How much more dangerous can you get?
Well,
I mean, there are different types of danger, though. So don't be thinking that is the most dangerous person on the planet. It's not. It is just a type of dangerous person. And that would give Othin a level of power many of the other gods just wouldn't have.
Wouldn't be able to have.
Yeah.
Well, and a spoiler alert, but this is like the ending to the actual game after the boss fight and all the post-fight stuff. Kratos finds his shrine, spoiler alert, and it has him in Greece.
Well, we haven't worried about spoiler alerts to
Fair
now.
enough. But and then he has the stuff that happened in the Norse games, and then after that, he's actually there's the final panel in the 3-panel shrine for Kratos. And it shows the future where he's actually venerated as a god, and he almost breaks down in tears because he never thought that would be possible. He thought he was too far gone. The ghost of Sparta, the massacre of Greece, he thought that was not a possibility, that he couldn't be loved on that level, that's the thing. And they even cover it in the game. Do you even understand that kind of love to be venerated as a god? Something that Kratos doesn't know. So the fact that
it's something that he pursues.
Yes, not actively, but he wishes he could have that. He wishes that he wasn't seen as a monster.
Well, and that's part of why we don't beg our gods for things. That's why I talk against doing ceremony and ritual the way that most people do it. It's because it's hollow. It's empty.
You're bartering.
Yeah, you might as well be going to Walmart and trying to buy something, or pick a store and just buying a thing.
Tajik have wares, you have coin?
Yes.
That's not our gods.
We're supposed to love them. And if you don't, well, that's fine. Just don't do anything for them. I mean, I'm sure that you got family members that you don't even love, let alone like. And what is it that you do with them? Oh, yeah, you just kind of
ignore them.
You ignore them and go about your day.
Well, and that's the other thing I really liked about this game is because everything's so interconnected, realm travel, the different realms, the beings, it feels like it's part of this larger, consistent tradition. When you hear the stories of Thor, it's real. Like Atreus, Loki is hearing them, and they're both fictional, like fantasy wonder tales, but they're also history, and it impacts him like our folklore's supposed to.
Right. Well, and yes, they got a lot of things wrong. Let's focus on the little bits that they did get right. We can use this to get people to wake up to what ethnic faith really is. And there's other groups out there, they're going to be focusing on the wrong things. And they'll think some of the stuff that's right is wrong because they don't like it because it doesn't fit their Yahweh image.
Oh, yeah. People are already freaking out because they have the All-Father Super Yahweh Odin, Edic Odin. And that's not even Edic Odin. That's pop
that's
culture.
Just something
Edic
in their
Odin.
head.
It's made up, and then it's perpetuated by people who are seeking power by using him in the same way the Christians used, the solar wizard that makes
the people
table.
want to be priests.
Yes.
They want to be the new priests of the new God.
Yes, and we can't let them. That's not okay. It's this. Just because you change the color of the cuffs and the noose does not make you not tied down. And here's the thing. The reason we called this Kratos is the story of Kratos is what allows this story to be told. Just like Hagrid from Harry Potter. That allows you a way to explain the Dagda. Harry Potter is just the vehicle through which this story is told, and people care about Harry Potter, and as a result, they care about Hagrid.
Because they care about Hagrid, we can get them to care about the Dagda.
And people care about Kratos.
Well, and here's the thing is, with the Dagda and Hagrid, for instance, people are very good. It's weird. It's the weirdest thing. Well, Hagrid is that's like the Dagda in Harry Potter. Except for it's not the Dagda, and they get excited and they're like, "What? Really?" And then they're excited to hear what the differences are. And I've had them break down in tears. I've had them laugh, the full emotional spectrum, because they got excited about the Dagda. Hagrid was just the door. They stopped caring about Hagrid in the story. It's not that they stopped caring about Hagrid, but they weren't They were then excited to learn about the Dogda, who is not Hagrid, but Hagrid-like, or rather, Hagrid is the Dogda-like. And we can do the same thing with God of War, with anything where they mess up, because let's be honest, that's what it is. They mess up and get things right.
And thank you to Kratos. A fictional character has given us a vehicle that can help us get our people to understand the gods.
Mm-hmm.
Thor, Othin, Thruder, Sindri, Brock, Freya, Freyr. But by understanding our own lore, we can parse this out. And then because people have something they can connect to, because like I said at the start, people are not growing up with their gods. They're not growing up with their folklore. Pop culture replaced that, unfortunately. But we can still use it. We can still use it to get people to reconnect to their true heritage, their inheritance, their gods. And I think I'll finish up with saying this about the games. It's a bit more, just like we had, it's the nature of the thing that matters, not its form from Kratos. He spits wisdom quite a bit in the game, and this is one of my favorites from the fourth one. Pain we endure. Faulty weaponry we do not. You can find wisdom. You can find understanding. You can find stories that can help our people get back to who we are in the most unexpected places. And sometimes it's in a game about a guy that literally kills our gods. It sounds counterintuitive. It sounds silly. It sounds ridiculous, even borderline disrespectful. But it happens. And with that, the Lore Keeper's out.
And I'm just going to say that they put Angry Booty in there just to make you angry, to distract you from the good parts, or to make you accept the Angry Booty. So don't let them trick you like that. That's because that's what are you tricky? Yes, that game company's tricky. So don't let them trick you. All right, until then, we'll see you guys next time.